Ben and Rook had appeared in a remote village where Kai had thanked them for coming. We see that she had the alien girl Esther with her. Ben tells her that they need to make it quick because they've only got about 6 hours or so until he's supposed to meet up with Gwen at one of the few remaining venues that they hadn't checked out just yet. The locals were a bit freaked out by them and had tried to avoid them because of the time cycles. And they'd run and hid in their homes, with Esther saying that they don't like aliens very much here, but this place is so remote that they don't see much outsiders at all, really. Kai goes over to the door of one of the people peeking out and tries to ask them some questions. Ben does not make an ass of himself here, as there is no Skurd to screw up the universal translator. That, and Ben can actually speak the language, but held back so as to not freak them out further. This let Kai get a bit more information out of them before they had finally shut the door, and she'd walk back over to the group. She tells them that the woman told her to see the guide to the Temple of the Sky, get to the highest point of the village. They look confused, but Rook points out there was a large cliff wall just above the village. Perhaps that is what they were meant to be looking for, and they decided to check it out. Getting to the top, they see that there were markings around the village that made it appear like a map. And Kai took a picture saying that the city doesn't have a guide, and Esther then continues saying that the city is the guide. And Ben saying whatever, asking if they could go now, he's under a time limit. Rook was leading the way, cutting through the vines and the vegetation in their way using his Proto Tools blades, with the girls complaining that the bugs wouldn't stop biting them. Ben just picks one out of the air and throws it into his mouth and begins eating them as they were walking. As Rook tells the girls that in many cultures throughout the galaxy, insects are considered a delicacy before eating one himself, grousing out the two of them more while they kept walking. As they were walking, something caused to the ground to begin shaking, with it moving upward where they were standing, and the group moved on off, not knowing what was going to happen, though they see a stone creature of some sort standing tall, ready to battle against them. Rook blasted the Guardian, but it had regrown that part of its body, healing it up, and chased after them as Kai and Esther used a vine to try to trip it up, having each end wrapped around a tree and pulling tight as it fell over. But then shortly after got back up and began to go after them, with Ben checking what time it was in Bellwood and getting annoyed by what he saw. Saying that they don't have time for this, Ben changed into Astrodactyl and used his energy whip to chop the Guardian into pieces, and then charged up energy from his jetpack-like appendage on his back. As they were rebuilding themselves, he then unleashed the energy as rings that blasted them till nothing was left, and the energy from it had also blown away a path and revealed the temple at the same time. They get to the temple and try to find the entrance, and Esther tilts her head slightly, looking at the stones, telling Kai that those stones looked sort of like the face her grandpa showed them with the numbers. Kai realized she was right and pressed them, causing the pathway to open, as the four of them then headed on inside. Kai led the way to where the artifact room should be, but there was nothing but a dead end there. Esther suggests that maybe there was like another switch or something like outside to open up the room, and began messing with the walls, accidentally causing the pathway to be blocked off and the walls to start closing in on them. Ben and Rook tried to keep the walls from closing, while Kai and Esther tried to find a way to get the trap to stop. They'd hit a switch that made the floor drop out from under them and began to fall. Changing again into Astrodactyl, Ben grabbed the girls and flew them down to safety. Quick, before going back up higher and snatching Rook next, dropping him off beside them as he changed back to human. Esther apologized for setting off the trap, and Ben tells them that everyone gets a trap set on them their first go around, whether they trigger it themselves or someone else does. As Kai looks around, saying that all those wall carvings only referenced one artifact, and she then runs across the stones on the water, hitting one that made the artifact appear and woke up the Guardian that was sitting on a throne. Ben sighed, saying that they didn't have time for this, as he hits the Omnitrix, changing into Vampire. Rook asks why he'd chosen that form, and Ben tells him he was going for atomics, but whatever. Then try to Corruptura. But when that didn't work, he began fighting it, with Kai being knocked over by the moving waters and noticed something off to the side, asking Esther for some help. The girls then began climbing as they snuck up behind whomever was on the pillar and grabbed them, which made the Guardian machine stop and drop down. Rook asked what happened, and Esther says that they did, as the two jumped down, showing them what, or rather who, they'd found. They see that the girls have a Galvan in hand, and Esther asked why they were pretending to be the temple spirit, and they tell them that they are are the temple spirit. Kai says he'd have to be Mesoamerica old at least, and Ben says that Azimuth is older than that, so it's not really a big deal. The Galvan says that they were asked to guard the place. They hear a voice saying that he asked them to be the guardian as they turn and see Professor Paradox, and the Galvan recognizing them, then jumps onto his shoulder, with him telling the Galvan that Ben and his group were friends. Kai says that she wants an explanation because this is getting really weird here. Paradox says that he always does and leads the way to some inscription, asking Ben if he recognized the markings on the wall, with Ben looking surprised, recognizing the image on the wall with Paradox, then nodding and continues on telling them that Maltruant was a rogue chronosapien that tried to rule over time and existence, but was defeated and split into pieces and scattered to keep him from being reformed, then suggested they all duck. They did so as an energy blast broke a part of the wall, making it fall on top of Rook, while Ben changed from Vampire to Kickenhawk and began fighting against Exoskull, who had been attacking them at the time. The artifact had been accidentally dropped as Esther was trying to help Kai get to safety, and Ben grabs it before Exoskull could, swinging it like a club and breaking part of his horn off. They were losing time here, and Ben had enough. Changing into atomics, he tossed the artifact aside and used a powerful energy blast to shoot Exoskull against the Guardian robot and made him pass out. Paradox says that everything is as it should be as a portal opened up and a hand reached out, grabbing the artifact and pulling it away before closing, then doing the same for Exoskull. Ben says that they gotta hurry because he's now got only about 2 hours to get home, get cleaned up, and meet up with Gwen to check out the venue. And he and Rook leave to get back to Bellwood, with Paradox telling the Galvan that it is currently 5th season on Galvan Prime and took them back home to their planet.